Oh, cool. Lots of familiar names in the group. Hi, Alex. Alex Payne, long time no see. We're going to be opening up with a karakia. I'll just paste it there. If anyone wanted to join in, they can. Oh, got my boss in here as well. Hi, Justin. No pressure. Okay, cool. We've got just over half the people in, so how does everyone feel about starting? Thumbs up, start, yep, cool, awesome. So welcome, thank you everyone for joining us today on this really awesome speaker series on designing ethics into medical technologies. We've got some incredible speakers with us today. I'm going to open up with the karakia that I've posted in there in the chat. You're welcome to join. Just put yourself on mute though if you are going to join, otherwise it'll sound a little bit messy because we won't be in sync. Tutawa mai I runga, tutawa mai I raro, tutawa mai I roto, tutawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, humie, huie, tai kie. Thank you, everyone. So kia ora, I'm Sav. I'm an experienced designer at Aramanua, the design studio embedded within Auckland Hospital. I'm a co-lead for the commercial translation module as part of Te Titoki Mataora, the MedTech research translator. I'll be hosting this session alongside Julie, who will introduce herself, and then the speakers will then do their intros.
Kia ora, everyone. So I'm Julie Schwan. I'm a research fellow at the Auckland Bioengineering Institute, and I'm part of the Future Leaders module. So today we have three very nice speakers. And so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and then to tell us a little bit of what motivated them to be where they are in their career. So sorry, we're going to start with a woman, because of course. So let's start with Claire, please.
I didn't expect that. I was expecting it in the right order. Okay, so I'm Claire Davies. I'm currently at Queen's University in Kingston, Canada. I was at the University of Auckland from 2009 to 2015, and I actually started the Masters of Engineering Studies in Medical Devices at the University of Auckland with lots of input from Lewis Graydon. And we really developed the program around meeting the needs of people from Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, which was great. And I hear it is still going well, so that's fantastic to hear. I moved to Queens mainly to be back with immediate family, but then of course my son decided to go to Auckland, so he's doing a conjoint degree at the University of Auckland in law and engineering. So you never know, we may head back again. My work, so I did mention the Masters of Engineering Studies that I originally started, but in addition to that, since joining Queen's, I've done something a little bit different. And so the main thing that I've been doing at Queen's University is I've joined with the Department of Occupational Therapy. And so, as well as engineering. So my actual position is in mechanical engineering, but I work for a specific course in occupational therapy. And so we put together teams of 3 engineering students and 3 occupational therapy students together meeting with a client from the community. So we end up having 6 clients from the community. We have 24 teams each year designing for these specific clients. And so we effectively try to prototype different designs for those specific clients. So I think I might just share a couple things here with you, if I can sort it out. If I can't, then I will actually stop sharing really quick. So if you look at this particular example, so we've got some glasses that we designed for a gentleman who had difficulties. Actually, first of all, he had autism, and he wasn't able to remember where he put what he did with his glasses, and he would often stand on them and he'd often sit on them, and even the titanium frames kept breaking. So we designed these ones that are a little bit more flexible. You can see they haven't got the lenses in. This is in the top right corner. You've got an individual who had Parkinson's disease, and he wanted a device that he could use to actually turn the pages of it, to hold the book up while he turned the pages of the book. So the students designed that. And so this was only a 12-week course. And then the one at the bottom is actually an ileostomy alignment device. And so in this particular case, you can see that there's a wafer, it's a sticker that actually goes on an ileostomy hole. Now, an ileostomy hole is in the event of a bowel resection, what sometimes happens is that the excrement from the body has to come out through the person's side. And so there's a hole in the person's side, and they put that wafer on, and then they attach a bag to that wafer. And so in this particular case, our individual had glaucoma, and she needed a way to align the wafer with the hole in her stomach. And so that's effectively, well, not stomach, but that area of her body. And so what that wafer, what that funnel thing actually does is helps her align that and put the wafer down. So these are simple little devices. I'm not going to go into detail with a lot of these, but effectively, those are the sorts of devices that we've been developing within the Queen's community. So we've had, I've been working on this for 6 years, and we have met the needs of about 36 different clients by doing it this way. To be honest, we keep this all as open source. We provide whatever information they need so that they can 3D print their things, or they can print them, or they can design them or redesign them as they see fit. So more recently, we've tried to partner with Makers Making Change, which is another community social enterprise where they actually post everything online to allow people, clients, to actually download the information and use it for themselves. So I think I'll end there.
Nice, thank you very much, Claire. Next we have Morris, Pita.
Kia ora tātou. Ngā mihi whakawhetai kia koutou kia Sav rāua ko Julie mō te pānui ki au ki te kōrero i tēnei rā. E pāna te mahi i au me aku hoa mahi. Ko Waio, hua mai, ko Ngāti Wai me Ngāti Hene o Kuiwi. Ko Whangaruru te Mona, ko Ngai o Tonga te Maunga, ko Ngai o Tonga te Marae, ko Urimu Moro Mona Rawa ko Whakaronga Hau o ko Tūpoku Tupuna, ko Morihu Taku Papa, ko Meri Taku Mama, ko Morris Pita. So what I just did was just thank the organisers for this event and for the work that's gone on behind the scenes to get everyone together. Well done. And also for the opportunity to speak and share a little bit about who we are and what we do, and perhaps some insight into some aspects which link to the kaupapa of the day. So I'm Morris Pita. I'm the founder and chief executive of what's more commonly known rather as Emergency Q. Emergency Q is a software service which was set up by our company, Taipari Mōhio Limited. Taipari Mōhio literally translate to the incoming tide of knowledge. And the reason it came about was based on a personal experience with one of my kids. I'm not clinical, nor is my wife. It was the weekend, our GP, she couldn't see him probably till Monday or Tuesday, and we were a bit concerned, so we took him to an ED. Quite a common experience for many parents and just people in general. Had they told us that, you know, your son actually isn't dying, he's not a medical emergency, it's not meningitis, he's got the flu, we would have made quite a different decision. Instead, we ended up spending, 8 hours or something like that, 7 or 8 hours in the ED. It's quite a long journey. We were clogging up the system without being aware of it. And so I thought the next day, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So that led to me designing Emergency Q. What we do is essentially we empower frontline triage nurses in the ED, and patients to make good decisions about where to start their journey of care. And so our tool has so far transferred 90,000, well, about 91,000 patients out of New Zealand EDs since we got underway. Let's put that in perspective. 90,000 is the total throughput for Waikato DHB in a year. We're in 6 New Zealand hospitals and a bunch of urgent care clinics. So it's gone really well. So that's essentially who we are and what we do. A key part of what we are is we're a Māori tech company. So as well as trying to solve problems that work for New Zealand Inc., we're acutely aware of the need to address inequity in the health status of New Zealanders, and in particular Māori, Pacifica, and other high need populations. So we've been really thrilled with some of the results we've seen there. Māori are hugely overrepresented in EDs. They use them as primary care clinics quite often for a number of reasons. And our software has seen significant increases in the rates of access to private primary care as a result. So we've been really thrilled with the way that's happened. And in a sense, it's not really an accident. I mean, when we built this business, it was designed to do as much good for as many people as possible. And I knew that in order to do that, we had to build software which met the needs of the communities we grew up in. And so, you know, we've been very deliberate in who we recruit. We recruit on the basis of talent and diversity, and it's made a huge difference. So 60% of our team come from South Auckland, you know, one of the most rich, untapped reservoirs of human capital in New Zealand. And half of our technical team are Māori. Our most recent person we appointed is a young Tongan woman from South Auckland who couldn't get a job in any of the tech companies, in spite of the fact she had a Master's of Information Technology. So we don't let those things get in the way, and we actively try and make a space for our communities to get represented and get a voice in what is an incredibly hard industry to get your first job in. So that's us.
Thank you very much, Morris. I do relate with you having to wait forever at the emergency department for your kids. My worst story was around Christmas Day, and my daughter kept crying. And at the end, we spent the whole day. And that's nothing, just nothing to do. Great. Anyway, our next speaker is Monique Cooper. Hi, Monique.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Monique Cooper. I'm currently in a role at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. I'm in a product development engineering role. So on an everyday level, I'm thinking about designing our products, whether that's with electrical choices, material choices, the amount of material, how we're designing, how we're sourcing all this material and supplies as well. My background is both in engineering. I studied mechatronics engineering, and I also did a business degree. So I did a degree in strategic management and finance. Those degrees have led me across the world. So I have been in Taiwan, exploring business strategy and technology over there, looking at prosthetic hands, looking at autonomous vehicles, and also exploring firefighting robotics, because I was also a volunteer firefighter for about 5 years. And then just because my curiosities aren't title-led or job-led, they're very much around how do I serve people and serve the environment that we live in. I've also gone over to Denmark as a part of my studies to explore business strategy over there, and was absolutely amazed and in my kind of area as they were talking about their various different business models, and they were simply just referring to the UN sustainability goals as this is 5 and this is 6, like that's the ones that we're trying to meet. And I was here from little New Zealand being like, which one's 5? And like Googling under the table so I didn't sound inadequate as I was speaking. So most recently, as a part of my studies and also my work here at Fisher & Paykel, I have looked into our competitors and looking at how essentially the whole healthcare industry is responding to the pressure to be sustainable where that pressure is coming from, what are the drivers in sustainability, in the healthcare industry in the first place, and then not just what are we doing here at Fisher & Paykel, which we have a whole sustainability team, an eco-design team that is throughout our groups here, but what is happening across the world and who are the world leaders within respiratory healthcare. And then, one other cool thing that's happening in my life at the moment, and I'd love if you guys could cross your fingers and toes, is that I was recently given the Rhodes Scholarship to go study at Oxford University over in the UK, and I'm waiting to hear results of whether I'm going to be able to study a master's program over there. One of the programs I've applied for is a master's in sustainability, the environment and enterprise, so really looking at how businesses and the environment can work together and make it not a trade-off of you're doing business or you're doing the environment. Like, can we actually make them meet? Yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much, Monique. So now the floor is open to questions from the audience. Do we have any? Or maybe I can start with one. And I have one for Monique. It's more a personal question, but I know what sustainability means for at home, trying to be sustainable, but what does it mean for a company to be sustainable? And maybe it's just me, but I'm not sure if other people would want to know or are not aware.
That's a very fair question, right? Because we're all trying to be sustainable in our everyday choices. The companies have a massive impact within the world. In the US alone, healthcare, the industry accounts for 9 to 10% of the global greenhouse emissions just within the US. So what it means for companies in themselves is to be looking at basically the life cycle of our products. So it's looking at carbon emissions, it's looking at where things are sourced, it's looking at waste and all these various different factors and how we can make good decisions to be more in line with the environment, to ensure that we are meeting the likes of the Paris Agreement, which is to prevent the warming of our environment by ideally 1.5 degrees. So for a company, it's really about making very informed decisions, not just decisions that look good, but decisions that are sustainable through and through. An example of that could simply be like, say we're thinking about plastic bags, and recently we've made policies in New Zealand to remove plastic bags, but what are our alternatives? So it's looking at sustainability from a point of view of like, yes, we don't want to be using plastic bags, but from this whole other perspective of the whole life cycle of a different bag, is that actually more sustainable than a plastic bag? So it's really about these different choices and trying to make these choices well. Hopefully that answers your question, Julie.
Yes, thank you very much. Next, we have Verna, who has her hands up.
Hello, kia ora, thank you. I have a question for Claire. I'm a physiotherapist working at AUT, and we've tried to enter into that same idea that you've been doing with your occupational therapy group at Queen's, and trying to link in with an interprofessional team of engineers to kind of solve everyday problems. And I just wondered if you had any tips on how to, I guess, get that 12 weeks seems like a very tight time frame to get to a common language and to identify problems. And what clinicians want is perhaps a really big solution, and how, just some ideas of how you can make that partnership work.
Admittedly, we started with 6 weeks, so 12 weeks is a lot better. So effectively what we had was we needed 2 key players and leaders to actually join the departments together. So I took the role from the engineering side, and actually arguably I've had 3 different occupational therapy instructors kind of take the lead from the occupational therapy side. And so what we managed to do was we aligned the classes such that the engineers get 2 independent classes a week, and then 2 hours with the occupational therapists, and the same happens the other direction. And during those 2 hours, it's really high speed, exactly what you're saying, learning the vocabulary. We meet with the clients 4 times during the semester. So within the first 2 weeks, we meet with the clients, and the client identifies, we use the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure as a start point for where they're going, and goal attainment scaling, so they can choose what sort of things they want. And based on that, basically the engineers ask questions, the occupational therapists ask questions, and they have to, together with that client, try and figure out what the roles of each person, each group member is. And so I think it really is, we throw them in the deep end. That's what it comes down to. We put them in teams, we allow the client to meet with them. We do start with a team contract where they identify the things that they're most comfortable with. And then we throw them in the deep end and say, you're designing for this client. You're going to meet them 4 times throughout the semester. Each time you meet with them, have at least a design or a prototype ready to go. And then we'll work from there. So that's, yeah, basically how we've done it. But you do need people who are strong leaders, and you do need, it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. I've been on sabbatical this past year, and I actually had one of my PhD students teaching the course. And there have been some hiccups. There have definitely been some hiccups, even though the occupational therapy instructor has done it before. So it's one of those things. But the other thing I have to admit is I hired 2 summer students. So we end the course at the end of April. And then May, June, July, August, I hired 2 engineering students to actually continue on the prototyping and actually get that device to the client. So although the first prototyping and the brainstorming is done within those 12 weeks, we don't actually have a deliverable, like a product that I'm really comfortable to deliver to the client. Yeah. Cool.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna skip Tanya's and first. I'll get back to your question in a moment. But this one for Morris. With the approach you've taken to solving an important problem and how you've built a diverse team, are there ventures or companies here or internationally that you're inspired by?
Yeah, good question. Who's that from? Justin.
Justin, my boss.
G'day, Justin. Look, it's interesting, eh? I think I probably draw as much inspiration from my local mechanic and the courage he had to set up his business, and people in our community who are running cafes during a pandemic, as I do from Zero Rocket Lab in Orion. I think being able to solve a problem, whether it's, serving your local community with looking after their vehicles, or whether it's, sending mini satellites into orbit, or in our case, trying to support patients to get the best care in the best location and free up our stressed ED staff to focus on people with high levels of need. It all comes down to, I think, a preparedness to jump in from the sidelines and have a go. And I think New Zealand is well known for that approach. And so for me, that's the key thing. We haven't looked at or followed in the steps consciously of any one organisation. I'm inspired by a wide range of organisations and businesses. And then also I draw probably more deeply on the teachings of my old people, of my ancestors, particularly my grandparents. When they were alive, I spent a lot of time with them. I was very blessed in that way. And also some of my kaumātua and kuia, in a more broad sense, who I spent a lot of time with as a young guy as well. So yeah, all that wrapped up in one, I think, is what creates, if you like, a principled and philosophical foundation for what we do. And the inspiration partly comes from people I see in my community struggling to make their businesses work for their staff, their families, and so on. For the great successes we see on the world stage through the rocket labs and the zeros. And more than any of that, the company side of it, though, I think probably the most inspiring part of it all for us is just the stories from the patients that we have the privilege of serving, and the stories from the frontline nurses in particular, who we have the privilege of serving. It's just phenomenal. We're quite fortunate to live in a place like Aotearoa and to have the sense of community that we have, because it is unique. I mean, there are many great places around the world to live, but we are incredibly fortunate to have the culture that we have here. So I find all of that stuff inspiring. I don't know if that answers the question at all, but.
Beautiful, beautiful. I guess extending on that a little bit and kind of addressing Tanya's question around involving ethicists or philosophers as external inputs as your guiding light. Could you talk a little bit about mātauranga Māori and how that's embedded in your company?
Sure. So one of the things when I set out to build this organization was I wanted it to just be natural feeling for me. Like I didn't want it to, I just wanted it to be able just to be myself and to work with people who got where I was coming from. Didn't matter really what their ethnicity was, as long as they got the fundamental values, which were that all things in the universe are connected. None of us, nothing, no thing, no tree, no rock, no river, no person, no organization, no team exists in isolation. Everything is connected. And that for us, for me anyway, is the principle of whanaungatanga. Everything's connected, everything's related. And that translates for us as an organization into how we relate to one another, how we deal with one another as people. It's quite a flat structure, which is kind of the way iwi and hapu work anyway. Usually the people who are leading these organizations are the last people to speak, and often don't say that much. And so we kind of try to run our team that way, and it works for us. So there's the way we operate as a team. There's the processes we follow. So we'll start our week with karakia. Again, quite natural. It feels great, and it addresses that, you know, as humans, there's more to us than just what you see. And so the other part of whanaungatanga, I suppose, that's important to the team is that this all translates into how we design software. So if we try to solve the problem of long wait times in emergency departments by simply building software for the hospital, it wouldn't work. So we've been able to reduce total volumes in the 6 EDs that we operate in here by between 5 and 15% per annum consistently. And that wouldn't work if we just built software that was designed from the point of view of the hospital. Likewise, it wouldn't have worked if we just built software that was built from the point of view of a patient, or from the point of view of the ambulance service, or from the point of view of primary care, or from the point of view of the waiting room. So we built it from all those points of view. So our software is actually one integrated series of portals that run off one cloud-based platform. And that sense of looking at the world from the different stakeholders' perspectives, standpoints, and starting from there in your problem solving is what's allowed our software to achieve the breakthroughs that it has.
Amazing. Thank you. Such an inspiration. I learned a lot from that one interview that I did with you, Morris, last year. Completely changed my perspective of like innovation in this space. Claire or Monique, did you want to add anything around from ethicists and philosophers to inspire your approach to your work, essentially?
I just have to agree completely with Morris, is that you need the stakeholders, all of the stakeholders involved from the beginning. Ever since I started as an academic in engineering, I have come time and time again, engineers need to design with their clients. There was a time when I took a couple engineers from a different supervisor to a physio clinic, and they came out of the physio clinic and they said, I'm going to have to redesign all my sensors. Those stroke victims don't operate the same way as they do on YouTube. And I fumed, but at least they got to that stage before they'd completed their studies. So maybe there was some improvement there. But, and that's it, is you have to involve everybody along the way and understand everyone's needs and be able to and willing to work with the clients. So I was describing to Sarv earlier that one of my students communicates entirely with an iPad. She has switch control with an iPad, and that's her only means of communication. And she went to a bank today for opening up a checking account. And the person at the bank said, well, you can't do electronic banking because you can't type. And this is a 53-year-old woman who's been typing since she was 5 years old. And it was despicable that that was their assumption from just looking at her. And so that's, when you talk about ethics, treat other people like you would like to be treated yourself. And that's primarily what how I try to design everything I do. Yeah.
Thank you. Monique, anything to add?
I just completely touched of those responses. I just wanted to add that within Fisher & Paykel, at this stage in time, we're exploring how we can do sustainability alongside local iwi as well. Just trying at this stage to build those relationships and understand then further their priorities so that we can build that into our systems here. So it is all a work in progress. But it's very much about, if we're talking about sustainability and if we are talking about wanting to do better by our environment and our people, all that comes together. So like leading on from what Claire was saying, is like you need those people at the table. And it is a journey, but there are many companies and organizations who are willing to take that. As we've heard from Morris as well, it's embedded into what he's doing. And hopefully within the next few years, it will be what we see all around us, that people can turn up as they are, who they are, and they're accepted. And that's in our design processes and in our systems.
Yeah, it seems to be the right time for all of this to start, the grounds to start shifting quite dramatically. All right, we have Daniel.
Kia ora koutou. I'm from the Innovation and Improvement team at Capital Coast and Hutt Valley DHBs in Wellington. I've got a question for Morris. I'm relatively new to the innovation and improvement space, but and I've come back from overseas, and it's really interesting to see it's really promising to see the kind of focus on equitable health outcomes in this country. But I guess what, I suppose thinking about kind of systematic improvement or solutions. I mean, it kind of it always makes me think like every process or system is perfect for producing the outcomes that it delivers. And in this country, we have a lot of health inequity across Māori health outcomes and Pacifica health outcomes. And just from your kind of product that you've obviously rolling out in a really successful way, what are the key learnings that you've kind of taken from the kind of rollout?
Yeah, so you mean the key learnings I've taken in terms of equity, or just in general around
how you've addressed it? I mean, I think the whole concept of patient co-design seems to be really important, and I think you've really touched on that. But if there's any other key learnings and key kind of concepts that you've utilized in trying to address that in your product, that'd be really helpful to hear about.
Sure. So for us, one of the key things was we didn't do anything for quite a while. So observed the problem, designed what I thought the solution could be, and then not a single stroke of code was entered for probably 6 months. So there was a time of real deep learning, not in artificial neural networks sense. We do that now with some of our own internal analytics and some of our forecasting, but more in terms of listening to people. So just spending time with people who were impacted in some way or other. So patients, their families, frontline staff, reception people, security people, anyone who would give us 5 minutes to truly try and understand the world from their perspective. And then you're able to refine, what it is you're building and actually build. And then when the building happens, we build very quickly. And translate it into a beta product and get data very quickly. So I guess that's, for me, is the key, is think carefully, get a good plan together, take the time on that part, listen to those who know, which inevitably is not you, because you only know what you know. So listen widely and listen actively, and listen with humble ears, if you know what I mean. It's quite easy to go into a listening situation where you're not hearing anything, and so it's that deep listening will give you the deep learning, and then from there, it's genuinely trying to empathize with those worldviews, and then once you think you're confident you understand them, then go forward boldly. Code and design boldly. Check back, change. Check back, change again, and then launch. But get on with it. That's the key thing, is to get on with it. One of my main frustrations or learnings, I suppose, having been doing this for a little while now, is in health, we talk a lot about the need to be innovative. You hear it a lot, but I classify it largely as policy rhetoric, because to me, by definition, innovation has a time element, and you are not innovating if you're taking 6 years to go from an idea to, publishing. That's great research, and that's valuable and has its own strength and its own place. But if you're looking to transform the world, you only have a certain amount of time to do it. And so where you have that urgency, you can rapidly. Hope that helps the answer some way.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's such a breath of fresh air, like hearing you speak about thinking carefully and listening humbly. It's so opposite to the usual startup mentality, like where you do stuff, think fast, break stuff. Whereas you're like, no, spend time thinking about what the solution actually could be, understanding the breadth of the problems and the root causes before you can actually design something. The designing comes quickly, the understanding takes time. Love it.
Yeah, and look, just one other thing I'll just add to that is I believe in active research as well. So you have to get to a point. I guess the point I'm making is you have to get to a point where you actually do something. And so that's the piece which for us is really critical. It's transforming the deep thinking and the deep learning into some sort of an outcome. And you may well fail, but that's learning in and of itself.
I listened to a podcast where they said you have to fail 15% of the time in order to actually learn. So if you're not failing, you're not learning anything. Any other questions or any comments from anyone? No? I have questions if nobody else wants to. I have a question. This is for all of you. How has this work changed you as a person? Monique, you're unmuted. Did you want to go first?
Okay. It's very hard to put it in just a very succinct manner. But I think for me, the like equity work that I've done with different organizations or in sustainability, I found that before I started this work, I found myself like more so in like the humanities, more so thinking about the world and the world that I want. But the work that I'm doing is very tangible. So I found myself very much getting frustrated, very much just like being a person who was talking about things. And what Mara said about active research really resonated with me of, yes, you can like learn, you can get frustrated, but actually this work that I'm doing, it is about creating like tangible outcomes that are changing how we're doing things. So it is about that iteration process of like, can we do this differently, and how can we do this differently, and how is it actually sustainable from these different perspectives? So I feel like I'm less idealistic and more practical, and I think that's quite a blessing, because at least I feel like I can do something rather than just get frustrated at these big theoretical systems.
Awesome.
This is the one question I was scared you'd ask. So from my perspective, I think that most importantly, it's being more of an advocate for other people. So I guess the reason I started in this area was I was a volunteer at a children's hospital when I was 15 years old. And from there, I had never intended A, to go into engineering, or B, to go into biomedical engineering. So when I had this kind of aha moment when I was really young, I started to realize how important it was to advocate for people who don't actually have the same things as you do. And I really my entire research career has been around trying to meet those needs and trying to focus on helping others help themselves, kind of really helping them to communicate. A lot of my research now is in augmentative and alternative communication. And Canada has actually just passed a mandate to actually develop the Accessible Canada Act. So I'm working with the standards around developing that specific act. So it's really trying to move that forward approach towards making everything accessible to everyone and trying to meet those equity needs. So I think that's been my biggest aha moment, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you. Morris.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's I've become more patient, I think, with the structures in which we live, things that we can't control. So, for example, when you're engaging with government agencies, they're complex, deep structures. They're not designed to change quickly. They're not designed to be innovative, I guess, because of the things I described before. Structurally, it's very difficult to innovate when you're deep. You do need to be flat to move quickly and nimbly. And so I've had to, but I get it now, in terms of these structures are designed for a certain purpose, and they provide certain, I guess, levels of confidence in outcomes. So I guess I've become more patient in that sense. It doesn't stop me testing the boundaries. Yeah. I guess the last thing for me is you can't work in this space and be associated with frontline staff and just not be humbled. You just can't. We've just got, as I mentioned earlier, some of the most amazing humans as we speak, looking after our families, looking after our loved ones. And so for me, it's just been an incredible honor to see that up close, and the unsung heroes. And there are tens of thousands of men and women doing this. And yeah, we're a lucky bit. We're a lucky group.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Pass back to Julie.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat from Brent Searchfield. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you wrote, But the question is, what can be done pragmatically to reduce barriers in New Zealand for your work? Who wants to start with that one? What are still the barriers that you're facing to get where you want to?
Yeah, I don't mind having a go at this. Oh, Claire, I'm happy to go after you though.
Oh, I think Grant's put his hand up. Do you want to clarify a little bit?
Just to clarify, it was really a follow-up to the question about the structures that currently exist that are hard to move, and the comments that a lot of those may not be movable, but really, what pragmatic steps can be made to ease the pathways to facilitate the work that you do.
Yeah.
And I suppose, to enable you to do more of what you currently do.
Yeah, look, the way I kind of describe it, and I'm quite open with, my colleagues who work in the public space about this, it would be really helpful if there were more friendly runways for us to land on. As I say, I appreciate what it must be like from their perspective. And the irony is there is so much help out there wanting to intersect with the public space to support and bring innovation to the table. It's just trying to find that that connecting piece. I think the health system, maybe other systems, but certainly the health system it has some amazing strength, and I've described the humans that run this system. They're amazing. Structurally, though, it can be a little inward looking. So if it would look outward slightly more and embrace people from outside of that system in the traditional sense, I think that would be a good starting point. And a minor, I guess a big case study was what we just saw in the past 2 years. We have an incredibly stretched frontline workforce, and they were robbing Pita to pay Paul, taking frontline nurses out of hospitals and putting them into doing testing and vaccines. And yet at the same time, we had tens of thousands of hospitality workers out of work who could have been trained in a day or so how to do a test. I think if we embrace more who we are as a country, an island at the bottom of the South Pacific, we can leverage one another so much more powerfully, and the future can only be better for that, in my humble opinion.
Sarv did put in the chat, anyone from the public space that would like to comment on that? Open for discussion.
Sarv, are you asking me to comment on that?
If you want, from your years of experience, your
yes, I mean, I came to healthcare back in 2009. I was brought in when at the time the national government introduced a whole bunch of operational metrics, like no one waiting more than 6 hours in the emergency department, and no wait times wait times of no more than 4 months for your first specialist appointment, and then 4 months for surgery, where previously there was no maximum wait time, and there was almost a culture of bragging rights around who had the longest surgical wait list. So the mindset internally in the hospitals was quite a shock. I came out of KiwiBank, so a small, at that time, 800-person organisation. I think I would agree with the concept of having friendlier runways. We do have a very inward-looking system. We don't make it easy for innovators to spend their time innovating and thinking about how to do things differently for a bunch of different reasons. There's structural reasons in terms of how we recruit and assign their time. Culturally, we don't have any incentives, let alone KPIs, to reward innovation. You almost innovate in spite of the system rather than with the system, because the system won't reward you for it. So we see a lot of really good ideas leaving the hospitals because it's too hard to do inside the hospital. So you take it out, and you'll probably find a friendlier audience in our universities. And certainly a number of our clinical staff have that opportunity to work in both universities and hospitals. So they take their ideas into the universities where they find friendlier reception. And then we end up buying back the solution. as a hospital. So yeah, look, there's just so many layers of, I guess, structural challenge, but I am, I guess, optimistic that under Health NZ and bringing together people who have, I guess, a lot of experience, but also the innovators who are out there doing the innovation and creating new solutions that have spoken to all the different stakeholders or customers. We're actually in quite a good position. I think this forum itself is reason for optimism. I think what we've got with Te Tauki Mata Ora is a really good thing. And I know the ministry is thinking about its, I guess, innovation ecosystem with a view to having a much more sort of modern and adaptive approach to supporting innovators who have good ideas, have the, I guess, the inspiration and the motivation to bring something into the hospital system or healthcare system for the benefit of our communities. So there's reason for optimism. As I say, I've been in the game for 12 years and seen lots of really good stuff done. I guess I do sometimes end up feeling a little bit challenged by just how slow the system can be and how many missed opportunities we end up paying the price for because we work in old ways instead of new ways that could have saved us time and money and provided better outcomes sooner. There's just the lack of urgency I find a little bit contradictory, because all of us have family members, all of us have our own experiences of being in a system that could be better for things that, I don't know, using tools that airports use or airlines use, and yet healthcare doesn't use those things. So yeah, so there's stacks of opportunity, but certainly lots of room for optimism.
Thank you very much for this very good insight, Justin. We have a, I think, last question from Morris, from Robin Laven. How should systems from the scale of small startups to research institutions to even government agencies or health services look more outwards and maybe work together as well?
Yeah, kia ora, Robin, great question. I think building on the friendly runway concept, you can't build a runway unless you want to build it. And you can't create the want unless, to Justin's point, there's incentives and I guess a value system within the organisation, which is looking to embrace third-party ideas and also ideas from within the organisation itself. You can always sort of, I guess for me anyway, find ways to drive greater innovation, provided I guess there's an openness and a receptiveness. So it's almost like philosophical for me. It's a mindset, and what you'll find is, and I think Justin might have seen this a number of times, people who solve problems typically aren't working on 12 projects at the same time. I think it's impossible to innovate if you've got a plate that's covered with different things. You need to focus, and it needs to be the thing that you're not willing to die for, but you know what I mean? It needs to be your energy and your soul and your purpose in the morning goes into that project. That's how breakthroughs happen, because innovation is just too hard. The amount of problems you're going to hit along the way that need to be overcome to succeed, you can't do it half focused. So I think focus and openness, a couple of things for me.
Yeah, I understand it's good to focus on one thing, but then there is money. How do you find the money for one thing? I have different projects because I have different grants. And I mean, if I want to pay for my salary for my students, I have to have a portfolio. So how do you only concentrate on one thing?
I guess it depends on the institution and the organization. So for a startup, they're typically going to be focused on one thing, and they're going to be borrowing from wherever they can get funds. For a government department, though, they have significantly larger pool of resources, and structurally, I guess it's just about how you allocate those. For an educational institution, I don't know enough about the way that those are structured, and therefore you may need a portfolio approach to make it work. Yeah, but even if it's focusing on more than one thing, I just don't see how you can focus on 30 things at once and expect to get breakthroughs. I think it's too much of a challenge.
I agree, it's tough.
Yeah, can I add to that? Sorry, Julie, just
Sure.
I picking up on Morris's point around the focus. I think a large organisation like a DHB, Health NZ or Education, we're actually really fortunate that we have alongside us the likes of Starship Foundation, the Auckland Health Foundation, etc. They actually have the ability to, I guess, provide the cash, to put it bluntly, to individuals who can focus. Because one of the great things we have in healthcare is that we have people who have focused for 20 or 30 or 40 years to be the best, I don't know, neurosurgeon or the best, whatever. So they have that deep knowledge. So if we can create the right sandpits that are pointing conceptually in the right direction, whether it's, I don't know, thematically, it might be about actually institutional racism. We've already got at all levels and everything we're doing, we've got to start kind of shifting. But that can be woven into what might otherwise be device innovation around a particular technique that requires 3 individuals for 3 years to just knuckle down and get it done, provided they can be protected. And that protection comes from securing the funding, having the right sponsorship. So I do think, I guess it's that ecosystem thing. We're really like being small, but having a good community around us actually is a really positive enabler if we can just get some of that prioritization in those sandpits right. And then have the friendly runway, to Morris's point, so that it can come back into the system once it's been developed sufficiently.
Thanks for that insight. Yeah, I think there is some change coming up. I don't know, from the green papers that is going out. I don't know if you heard about that with MBIE, but I think there is some discussion going on about creating the right ecosystem. We have a question from Tanya, which is a bit long to read. Tanya, do you want to ask the question yourself?
I'm sorry, I've got a helicopter above us at the hospital, so I don't want to unmute too long. But yeah, I was just basically wondering if we're talking about, a different way of doing things in hospitals and in, let's say, design and innovation. How can we bring those two closer together, taking into account the history of how things have happened, not always in an ideal way? I guess the example was medical health records. I think we can, or electronic records, I think there's still room for improvement there. And I guess that has contributed to some of that sort of aversion of some healthcare providers to engage with new systems. If they fail, what happens and whatnot. So how do we sort of bridge that gap, and how do we make that work is, I guess, fundamental question here.
Claire,
maybe it's too much for the last minute, but yeah.
Yeah. Claire,
I was going to say exactly what Justin did. With Ara Manawa there, it's been fantastic. I visited when I was on sabbatical in New Zealand, and I think it's fantastic that the team of designers that they have within that space is wonderful. And I'm trying to create something very similar here at a co-design environment within the hospital. My lab is within the hospital, and just trying to get everybody on board to work together to actually move forward and develop things together. I think that's the way to go. Yeah.
I am hopeful that we'll see with it's a hypothesis I have, and I haven't written it down anywhere, but I have wondered whether or not our requirement to address inequity, so much of it is experiential. It's about the mechanisms by which we enable people to engage meaningfully and have control in a format that they are comfortable with what available health solutions might exist. That is so much like, that's just fodder for design, because it's about understanding people and what they need. And is it a face-to-face, and who with, or is it a device? Is it what is it? Sitting down, listening, understanding what's going to enable them to draw down from the technologies that exist in a way that's going to be good for them and their whānau. Design is just really well placed for that. So I've got my fingers crossed that we'll see more, because people realize, we can't solve this using engineers. No disrespect to the engineers in the room. They have a role to play, but we need people who can sit and listen and observe, try some things, and bring all those different perspectives together. Design is really well placed for that. It's just really darn hard to get funding. It's really hard.
I am so sorry, we have run over time. Thank you everyone to your contributions. I think my main takeaway from this is that we really need to work together and combine our powers like the Planeteers in Captain Planet to save the world and the people. Can't do it alone. I will close with a karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, kia te nako, te titana, te wairua I te ara takata. Koiara I rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, huie, tai kie. Thank you everyone for your time today. Ka kite.
Thank you.